June 21, 2025. Someone in Arizona opens Google, types a specific address, Nancy Guthrie's address in the Catalina foothills of Tucson, and hits enter. That is 7 months and 11 days before Nancy disappeared. Then it happens again. January 11th, 2026. The same address, 3 weeks before the night she was taken. And January 11th is one of the exact dates that investigators specifically asked Nancy's neighbors to review their Ring camera footage for, requesting footage between 9 p.m. and midnight, without explaining why. In between those two address searches, there were image searches. Someone searching for pictures of her home, the property layout, the structure visible from the street, visual reconnaissance conducted from a keyboard before anyone ever drove past in person. And between December 13th and 20th, 2025, someone in Tucson specifically, not Phoenix, not Scottsdale, not anywhere else in Arizona, Tucson, searched for Savannah Guthrie's salary. Fox News Digital reported all of this on February 18th, 2026, based on Google Trends data they observed and reconstructed over multiple search terms and time windows. 7 searches, 8 months. A progression from address to images, to financial intelligence to address again, ending 3 weeks before Nancy Guthrie disappeared from her home during a 41-minute operation that disabled cameras, left no fingerprints, and demonstrated knowledge that could only come from extensive preparation. Tonight we examine exactly what those searches show and what they do not show. We examine the critical distinction between Google Trends, the public-facing tool that Fox News used, and Google's actual server logs, which are where law enforcement goes with a warrant. We examine how IP address investigations actually work in federal criminal cases, how the path from a search term to a subscriber name operates, and what former FBI agent Lou Vito meant when he called this an absolute treasure trove. We examine what the behavioral progression of these searches, if they are real, reveals about the person who planned this operation and how long that planning actually ran. And we examine why this evidence thread, even with its acknowledged limitations stated clearly and honestly, may be the most significant public development in this investigation since the doorbell footage was released. Because here is what does not change regardless of how you assess the Trends data. If real searches were made from a real device in Arizona on these dates, those searches are documented permanently in Google's actual server logs, not in the Trends visualization, in the raw data, and those logs are accessible to law enforcement with a warrant. A warrant that, in a federal kidnapping investigation with over 400 investigators assigned, can be obtained quickly. That is the story, the private data behind the public signal, and the path from that data to a name. Before we go further into this investigation, if you believe cases like Nancy Guthrie's deserve serious, forensically grounded, evidence-based coverage that follows every documented thread and states every limitation honestly, subscribe to Unclosed Files right now and hit the notification bell. New investigations every single week. If the digital trail in this case is already on your mind, hit that like button and drop your analysis in the comments. Which evidence thread do you think is closest to producing a name? The IP address investigation, the DNA genealogy pipeline, or the cell tower data? I read every comment. Leave your thoughts below. Now, before any analysis of what these searches mean, there is a woman at the center of this case who deserves to be remembered as a person and not as a target. Nancy Guthrie lived in the Catalina foothills neighborhood of Tucson, Arizona for more than 50 years. She was widowed in 1988 when her husband Charles died at 49 during a mining trip in Mexico. She raised 3 children, Annie, Savannah, and Cameron, alone in that desert community after that. She attended St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church in Tucson, where her name has been spoken in prayer every Sunday since she disappeared. She was described publicly by Sheriff Chris Nanos as sharp as a tack, fully cognitively present, no impairment. A woman who understood everything happening around her. Her daughter Savannah is co-anchor of NBC's Today Show, one of the most recognized journalists in American morning television. Her daughter Annie lives nearby in Tucson. Her son Cameron has served in military and intelligence roles. Nancy had significant physical limitations. She required daily medication for a serious heart condition. She had a pacemaker that synced to her phone via Bluetooth. She could not walk 50 yards unassisted, a fact confirmed publicly by the sheriff. She wore hearing aids, which she removed at night, leaving her in complete silence when she slept. On the evening of January 31st, 2026, she had dinner and a card game at her daughter Annie's home. Her son-in-law, Tommaso Cioni, drove her home and waited until the garage door closed at 9:50 p.m. That is the last confirmed normal moment in her documented record. At 1:47 a.m., her doorbell camera was physically disconnected. At 2:12 a.m., a motion sensor on the property triggered. At 2:28 a.m., her pacemaker stopped syncing with her phone. 41 minutes. Her blood was found on the front porch. Law enforcement described conditions inside the home as, in their own words, very concerning. She has not been seen since. And now, in the digital record that preceded all of this, there are searches. Searches from Arizona. Searches from Tucson. Searches for her address and her daughter's salary. 7 of them, spanning 8 months. Let us begin with precisely what Fox News Digital reported and what the limitations of that report are, because the distinction matters, and because stating it honestly is what distinguishes serious analysis from speculation. Fox News Digital, on February 18, 2026, reported that they observed and reconstructed Google Trends data appearing to show the following. Search activity for Nancy Guthrie's home address in the Catalina foothills between June 21st and 28, 2025, originating from Arizona. A possible Google image search for the same address between March 1st and 8th, 2025, specifically looking for images or a map of the home. Another possible Google image search for the same address between November 30th and December 1st, 2025. A search for Savannah Guthrie's salary from Tucson between December 13th and 20th, 2025. And the address appearing in Trends data again on January 11th, 2026. Fox News used the word may throughout their reporting. May have been searched, may have seen activity. That language reflects a documented limitation of the public tool they used. Google issued a statement directly to Newsweek and to Fox News Digital in response to this reporting. Google said, Google Trends is designed for understanding trends in large datasets. For topics with low or no searches, a Google Trends chart will often mix in random noise to protect people's privacy. That means that a Google Trends chart showing a spike for an uncommon topic is not definitive evidence that a search actually happened. Newsweek reported that they were unable to independently verify the Google Trends data that Fox News had cited. A source familiar with the investigation told Fox News Digital directly that law enforcement would use investigative tools like subpoenas, not publicly available marketing information. These limitations need to be stated because they are real. The Public Trends tool adds statistical noise to low-volume searches to protect individual privacy. A spike in trends for an obscure address does not definitively prove that a specific person searched for that address. Anyone presenting this data as confirmed proof of individual behavior is going beyond what the evidence shows. And yet, the investigative significance of what Fox News documented does not depend entirely on whether those trend spikes represent real individual searches. It depends on what law enforcement can access that the public cannot. And that is where this story actually lives. Here is the fundamental distinction that every analysis of this evidence must start from. Google Trends is a public-facing visualization tool designed for marketing and trend analysis. It is not the source. The source is Google's actual server infrastructure, the permanent comprehensive logs that record every search made through Google, with the full metadata that the public tool never shows. Exact timestamps to the millisecond, the IP address of the device that made the search, the device type, the geographic location of that device, the search terms exactly as typed, all of it stored permanently in Google's systems, inaccessible to the public, fully accessible to law enforcement through proper legal authority. When the FBI and the Pima County Sheriff's Department investigators assigned to this case look at the Google Trends data that Fox News published, they are not looking at the same thing as the public. They are looking at a signal, a publicly visible indicator that points toward data they can reach through a warrant that the public cannot reach at all. The path from a warrant to a name is not hypothetical. It is documented procedure used in thousands of criminal investigations every year. Let us walk through exactly how it works. Step 1. Law enforcement drafts a warrant application to Google's legal compliance team, specifying the search terms of interest and the time windows identified through the Trends data. In this case, searches for Nancy Guthrie's address in the Catalina foothills, searches for images of that address, searches for Savannah Guthrie's salary, all between approximately March 2025 and January 2026, originating from Arizona and specifically from Tucson. A federal judge reviews the application and, if probable cause is established, signs the warrant. Step 2. Google's legal compliance team queries their server logs against those specifications. The results are not trends data, they are raw records. Every instance of those searches within the specified parameters, accompanied by the complete metadata for each instance. The IP address of the device, the exact timestamp, the geographic coordinates of the device at the time of the search. Step 3. Law enforcement takes those IP addresses to the internet service providers operating in Arizona: Cox Communications, CenturyLink, Comcast, AT&T, T-Mobile. Each ISP maintains detailed subscriber records linking specific IP addresses to specific customer accounts at specific times, records required for billing and network management that exist permanently in their databases. A second warrant is served to each relevant ISP. The ISP queries their subscriber database for the account associated with that IP address at the precise timestamp from the Google warrant results. The database returns subscriber information: name, billing address, payment method, contact information, account activation date. Step 4. The subscriber name is in the investigative record. Background check, criminal history, employment verification, known associates, financial records. The comprehensive investigation begins from a confirmed identity rather than from a profile. Former FBI agent Lou Vito addressed this process on national television and described it as an absolute treasure trove. He said investigators would be conducting what he called reverse engineering against the IP addresses, examining not just the specific Nancy Guthrie searches, but the complete internet history associated with those IP addresses going back through 2025 and up to the date of the abduction. Every website visited, every search conducted, every platform accessed, every purchase made, every video watched, every forum participated in. That reverse engineering approach is what transforms a single data point into a comprehensive picture of planning and intent. Think about what that complete history might contain if the searches are real and if they were made by the person who planned this operation. Did the same device search for how to disable a Nest doorbell camera? Did it search for information about Bluetooth pacemaker signal range, how far a pacemaker can transmit to a paired phone before the connection drops? Did it search for Walmart store locations in Tucson and their hours? Did it look up Ozark Trail products and their specifications? Did it search for information about cryptocurrency, Bitcoin wallets, or anonymous payment methods before the ransom notes were sent to media outlets? Did it research other wealthy television anchors before narrowing its focus to Savannah Guthrie and her mother? Did it look up quiet residential neighborhoods in the Catalina foothills and their street layouts? Every one of those searches, if they exist in the history associated with the IP address that made the Nancy Guthrie address searches, becomes additional documented evidence of planning, preparation, and intent. Not circumstantial hints, permanent records. And the investigation does not stop at search history. The complete internet history includes YouTube videos watched. Investigators can see if someone spent time studying crime documentaries, surveillance techniques, or case studies of successful kidnapping operations. It includes Reddit forums visited. Investigators can see if someone participated in communities discussing security vulnerabilities, anti-surveillance methods, or criminal planning. It includes Amazon, eBay, and retail purchase histories made through the browser, potentially showing purchases of items consistent with the operational equipment visible in the doorbell footage. It includes every mapping service accessed, every property lookup conducted, every financial information site visited. Lou Vito said it plainly. If anyone knows the person and their computer has those images locked in there somehow or search history, that is a person investigators want to talk to. Now let us examine the behavioral progression that the documented search timeline, if it reflects real activity, describes, because the progression itself is analytically significant regardless of the tool's limitations. The sequence Fox News documented moves through 5 distinct phases that follow a specific operational logic. Phase 1. Initial target selection. The address search in June 2025, originating from Arizona, establishes the physical location of the target. This is not a search for Nancy Guthrie generally. It is not a search for the Guthrie family. It is a search for a specific address in a specific neighborhood. Someone who already knows Nancy Guthrie lives in the Catalina foothills and wants to confirm or identify the exact property. The specificity of the search at this earliest stage is significant. It indicates that target selection had already occurred before the first documented digital act. Phase 2, visual reconnaissance. The image searches in March and November 2025 represent a transition from text intelligence to visual intelligence. A text search for an address tells you a location. An image search for that address tells you what the property actually looks like, its layout relative to neighboring properties, the angle of the driveway, the position of the front door relative to the street, the placement of visible security features like cameras or motion lights, whether the property has fencing, what the sight lines from neighboring homes allow in terms of observation. Someone was studying this property from their computer before ever physically approaching it. Phase 3, financial reconnaissance. The salary search between December 13th and 20th, 2025 represents a shift in the nature of the intelligence being gathered. This search is not about the location anymore. This is about the financial calculus, understanding what a Today Show co-anchor earns, calculating what ransom amount her family could realistically pay, determining whether the operation was worth executing from a financial risk-reward perspective. The ransom notes sent to media outlets after Nancy's disappearance reportedly demanded amounts around $6 million. A salary search for Savannah Guthrie is consistent with someone calculating a ransom demand based on documented earnings of a major network television anchor. Fox News noted for context that searches for other anchor salaries, Anderson Cooper, Sean Hannity, also appeared in Trends data, but in their respective home cities of New York. The Savannah Guthrie salary search came from Tucson, the city where her mother lives, the city where someone had been searching for her mother's address for the past 6 months. Phase 4, final confirmation. The address search on January 11th, 2026, 3 weeks before Nancy disappeared, is the final digital act before what investigators believe was the transition to physical surveillance. The FBI and Sheriff's Department specifically asked neighbors to review ring camera footage from January 11th between 9 p.m. and midnight. That specific unexplained ask reflects investigative knowledge. They believed something happened on that date that warranted camera review. When the Trends data shows an address search on the same day that investigators already believe was operationally significant, the convergence is not something investigators examining the full picture can dismiss. Phase 5, execution. February 1st, 2026, the 41-minute operation. Cameras disabled in sequence. The suspect wearing a balaclava, tactical gloves, and a hooded jacket in warm Arizona temperatures, covering the full geography of his appearance, suggesting, as tattoo analyst Darren Rosa assessed, that what was underneath those layers was identifiable in ways that required full coverage. The Ozark Trail backpack, the firearm in the holster, the 1 inch of exposed wrist between the sleeve and the glove that former FBI profiler Jim Clemente said revealed, in his words, that he is not a professional. The full progression, from an address search in June 2025 to the night of February 1st, 2026, spans 244 days. 244 days of documented, sequential, phase-by-phase intelligence gathering, if the searches are real. 244 days is not impulse. It is not crime of opportunity. It is not a spontaneous decision made under emotional pressure or temporary circumstances. 244 days is a planning cycle. Behavioral analyst John Kelly, appearing on The Megyn Kelly Show, addressed the significance of pre-offense search behavior in cases of this type. This kind of activity represents exactly the pre-offense behavior expected in a planned abduction. Someone who can sustain focus on a specific objective across 8 months demonstrates extraordinary patience and the ability to delay gratification, psychological characteristics that are relatively rare in criminal behavior and that create a specific investigative profile. That profile has practical investigative implications. Someone who spent 8 months in a systematic planning cycle did not do it in complete secrecy. Over that length of time, patterns emerge. Unusual computer activity observed by people in their household. Strange questions about the Guthrie family or about Savannah Guthrie's financial situation. Unexplained familiarity with Nancy's home address or neighborhood. Obsessive interest in a television personality's salary and family circumstances. These behaviors, observed in isolation over weeks and months, might have seemed inexplicable or harmless. Presented now against the documented search timeline, they become recognizable. Lou Vito made the public appeal explicitly. If anyone knows the person and their computer has those images locked in there or search history, that is a person we want to talk to. Law enforcement is publicizing these searches to trigger exactly that recognition in people who were close to the person responsible. Now let us examine what the January 11th date specifically means to the investigation, because it carries more weight than any other point in the search timeline. January 11th appears in this case in 3 separate contexts. First, in the trends data, an address search on that date. Second, in the Ring camera app, a message posted by a neighbor to which a sheriff's department captain replied asking users to seek out verified department posts when submitting tips. A response that implies something was posted about January 11th activity that generated enough concern to warrant an official reply. Third, in the investigative ask, the specific request from the Sheriff's Department for Ring camera footage from between 9 p.m. and midnight on January 11th. A date-specific, time-specific request that communicates that investigators already have reason to believe something happened on that date. An address search on the same day investigators believe physical surveillance may have begun creates a convergence between the digital record and the physical record. If the person who searched the address in June, studied images of the property in November, researched the salary in December, and searched the address again on January 11th, was also physically in Nancy's neighborhood on the evening of January 11th, and if Ring camera footage confirms a vehicle or individual near the property on that date, the connection between the digital intelligence gathering and the physical surveillance operation becomes documentable from 2 independent sources simultaneously. That is how evidentiary cases gain what defense attorneys call unstoppable momentum, not from one piece of evidence in isolation, from the convergence of independent evidence streams that each separately might be explicable or challenged, but that together point toward only one possibility. Watch how the convergence builds from this evidence thread. The IP address from the Google warrant leads to a subscriber name. That name goes into a comprehensive background investigation. Investigators look for credit card and bank records showing purchases consistent with the operational equipment seen in the doorbell footage. An Ozark Trail 25-liter backpack, which is a Walmart exclusive product, plus a firearm holster, gloves, and masking equipment. If a purchase matching the backpack appears in the financial records of the person whose IP made these searches, that connects the digital planning to the physical equipment acquisition. Then investigators look at cell tower records. If the subscriber's phone was in the Catalina foothills area on January 11th between 9 p.m. and midnight, the same time window investigators specifically asked neighbors to check for, that connects the digital address search to physical presence near the property on the same date. Then, investigators look at whether the same phone was dark on the night of February 1st, the same principle that Brian Kohberger's prosecution established. The absence of cell tower data during the operational window is itself behavioral evidence. An innocent person does not turn off their phone at 1:47 a.m. and turn it back on after 2:30 a.m. on the same night someone is taken from their home nearby. Then investigators cross-reference against the tattoo database. If the subscriber identified through the IP address has a prior arrest record that includes photographed tattoos matching the black and gray wrist marking visible in the doorbell footage, a marking that 30-year tattoo veteran Darren Rosa placed in the Southwestern gang and cartel cultural context, and that former FBI profiler Jim Clemente said would help investigators rule in and rule out people, the physical evidence from the scene connects to the digital evidence from the search history through a biographical record that the suspect cannot change. Each convergence point strengthens every other. Google searches prove a planning timeline beginning 8 months before the abduction. Cell tower data proves physical presence on operationally significant dates. Financial records prove equipment acquisition. Tattoo database records prove a biographical connection to the physical evidence. DNA genealogy connects biological trace material from inside the home to a family tree that leads to an individual. When all of these streams reach the same person, the case that results is not circumstantial in the way that each piece individually might appear to be. It is comprehensive. It is interlocking. and it is documented by the suspect's own behavior over 244 days. For the Guthrie family, these searches represent something that goes beyond the investigative significance. They represent the answer to a question that no family member in this situation wants to face, but that the evidence now requires. This was not random. It was not a stranger who selected Nancy Guthrie by chance, who happened to drive through the Catalina foothills and chose her home arbitrarily. Someone made a decision about her specifically. Someone identified her specifically as a target. Someone searched her address specifically, studied her home specifically, calculated the ransom value of her specifically. Savannah Guthrie said on the Today Show in her first public interview since her mother disappeared that she fears her mother may have been targeted because of her own fame, that it is too much to bear to think that she may have brought this to her mother's door. The salary search from Tucson confirms what behavioral analysts had already assessed. Someone calculated that the mother of a wealthy television anchor could generate a significant ransom payment. Her success was the weapon used against the person she loves most. That knowledge, that someone spent 8 months researching your family while you were living normally, while you were on air delivering the news, while you were celebrating holidays, while you were tucking your own children in at night, creates a specific psychological burden. Savannah was broadcasting while someone was calculating her mother's ransom value based on her salary. The family was together for Thanksgiving while someone was studying images of Nancy's property. They were celebrating Christmas while someone was in the final financial calculation phase of a plan they had been building for 6 months. The parallel timelines, normal life running alongside predatory planning, is what makes the discovery of these searches so devastating for the family and so significant for the investigation. But these searches also represent something else. They represent the suspect's most consequential mistake, not the 1 inch of exposed wrist visible in the doorbell footage, not the Ozark Trail backpack that Walmart can trace through purchase records. The digital trail, the permanent time-stamped geolocated record that he created himself, believing he was conducting anonymous research, not understanding that the internet records everything. He understood physical, operational security. He wore a balaclava and gloves and covered his silhouette and reached up to disable the camera and wore a jacket in warm temperatures because what was underneath required covering. He planned the 41-minute window. He knew the camera locations. He chose the right equipment. He selected a back road for departure that bypasses every major intersection. But he sat down at a device in Arizona, in Tucson, and he searched. And he searched again. And he built a digital record of his planning that is more comprehensive than any crime scene photograph, because it shows not just what he did, but when he decided to do it and how long he spent preparing. Google's servers do not forget. The ISP subscriber logs do not expire. The warrant process that law enforcement uses to access that data is established, efficient, and fully functional in a federal kidnapping investigation of this magnitude. 244 days of documented planning, each day time-stamped, each search geolocated, each IP address permanently linked to a subscriber account, and 400 investigators with the legal authority to pull every piece of it. If you have any information about the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie, if you know someone who was unusually interested in Savannah Guthrie's salary or financial situation last year, who showed obsessive interest in the Guthrie family, who had unexplained knowledge of Nancy's home address, who showed odd computer behavior in 2025, who spoke about the Guthrie family or about wealthy television, personalities in ways that seemed unusual at the time, the FBI needs to hear from you. The tip line is 1-800-CALL-FBI. Submit tips at tips.fbi.gov. The Pima County Sheriff's Department tip line is 520-351-4900. The family reward is $1 million, payable anonymously. The FBI reward is $100,000. You do not have to give your name. Every detail matters. If this investigation reached you, if the digital evidence made the planning picture clearer in a way that stays with you, subscribe to Unclosed Files. Hit the notification bell. We follow every thread on this case and on every case that still demands answers. New documentary investigations every week. We do not look away. This documentary was produced for informational and educational purposes only, based on publicly available sources including Fox News Digital's reporting from February 18, 2026, Google's official statement to Newsweek, and Fox News Digital clarifying that Google Trends data for low-volume topics may contain statistical noise and is not definitive evidence that individual searches occurred, and on-the-record analysis from named credentialed professionals, including former FBI agent Lou Vito. Newsweek was unable to independently verify the trends data cited by Fox News. A source familiar with the investigation confirmed to Fox News Digital that law enforcement uses subpoenas rather than public marketing tools. The distinction between Google Trends as a public visualization tool and Google's actual server logs accessible through warrants is explained throughout this video to accurately represent what is and is not confirmed evidence. No individual has been charged in connection with this case. This channel has no affiliation with the Guthrie family, the Pima County Sheriff's Department, or the FBI. Nancy Guthrie deserves to come home. Her family deserves the truth. And the digital trail, whether the public signal points accurately or whether the real data behind it carries the full weight, leads somewhere. It leads to a device. A device leads to an IP address. An IP address leads to a subscriber. A subscriber leads to a name. And that name leads to answers that this family has been denied since February 1st, 2026. The internet never forgets, and neither will we. Let us also examine what this digital trail means in the broader context of the investigation's evidence architecture, because the Google searches do not sit in isolation. They intersect with every other evidence thread in ways that compound their investigative value. The FBI has confirmed they are conducting a tower dump analysis, pulling cell tower records from every carrier serving the Catalina foothills area across multiple dates, including January 11th and January 24th, the dates investigators specifically asked neighbors about, and February 1st, the night Nancy disappeared. A tower dump creates a record of every device that pinged those towers during the specified time windows. Cross-referencing the subscriber identified through the Google IP warrant against the tower dump data is a direct, specific, testable investigative step. If the subscriber's device appears in the tower dump for January 11th, the same night someone searched Nancy's address, and the same night investigators already believe surveillance activity occurred, the digital and physical records converge on the same person on the same date. Digital forensics expert Heather Barnhart, who worked on the Brian Kohberger case analyzing phone data, told Fox News that the digital blackout principle is critical in this investigation. She noted that a phone used for Google searches and for navigating to a target's neighborhood will have created tower records on those dates unless the user deliberately powered it down. If the device associated with the IP address was dark during the operational hours of January 11th, present at towers near the Catalina foothills during the day when the address was searched, then absent from tower records during the 9 p.m. to midnight window that investigators specifically asked about, that pattern of intentional disconnection on an operationally significant date is itself behavioral evidence. Barnhart also identified a detail about Wi-Fi proximity that extends the digital evidence picture further. Even a phone that does not connect to a Wi-Fi network appears in router logs if it comes within range of the signal. Nancy's home router would have logged any device that came within Wi-Fi range during the surveillance visits in January, even if that device never completed a connection. If the device associated with the Google search IP address appeared in range of Nancy's home Wi-Fi on January 11th, the same day its IP made the address search, that data exists on a server right now and can be accessed through proper legal process. The Walmart evidence thread connects directly to the digital timeline as well. Former FBI profiler Jim Clemente and retail forensics analysts examining this case have noted that the equipment visible in the doorbell footage, specifically the Ozark Trail 25-liter backpack, which is Walmart's own private label outdoor brand and is sold exclusively at Walmart, was almost certainly acquired within the planning window that the trends data documents. If the subscriber identified through the Google warrant made a purchase at a Tucson area Walmart consistent with the backpack between December 2025 and January 2026, after the image searches studied the property layout, and after the salary search established the financial parameters of the operation, that purchase record is a physical evidence bridge connecting the digital planning phase to the operational execution phase. Every Walmart checkout lane has security cameras positioned to capture customer faces. Even a cash purchase creates a visual record. Facial recognition software can compare checkout footage to driver's license photos in state databases. If the face on the checkout camera matches the subscriber identified through the IP address, another convergence point is confirmed. The DNA genealogy pipeline adds the biological dimension to this convergence architecture. C.C. Moore, the chief forensic genealogist at Parabon Nanolabs, whose methodology contributed to identifying the Golden State Killer after more than 40 years, told Fox News Digital that if the mixed DNA sample recovered from inside Nancy's home can be processed through investigative genetic genealogy, it is just a matter of time until they know whose it is. Not a hope. A professional statement of process. When genealogy analysis produces a family tree that points toward a specific individual, and that individual is the same person whose IP address made these searches, whose phone appeared in the tower dump, whose financial records show equipment purchases, and whose tattoo is in a federal booking database, the convergence is complete. This is how federal kidnapping cases become prosecution-ready, not through one dramatic breakthrough, but through the patient, methodical accumulation of independent evidence streams that each, separately, can be challenged or explained, but that together describe only one possibility. The case that emerges from that convergence is not circumstantial, it is comprehensive. It is documented by the suspect's own behavior, and it is built from evidence that the suspect created himself. The person who sat at a device in Arizona in June 2025 and typed an address into Google was not making an irreversible decision that day. He had 244 more days to decide not to do this. 244 opportunities to walk away. 244 moments when he could have closed the browser, deleted the history, chosen a different path. He did not. He searched again and again and again, each search adding another timestamp to the record that law enforcement is now examining with full legal authority and the resources of a federal investigation. The internet does not distinguish between public and private in the way the person who made these searches believed it did. The public tool showed a faint signal. The private data contains the full record, and law enforcement is not limited to the public tool. 244 days, 7 searches. One name, somewhere in Arizona, linked to an IP address that Google has logged and an ISP subscriber record that exists permanently in a database. The warrant process is established. The legal authority exists. The investigators are working. And Nancy Guthrie is still waiting. There is one more dimension of this evidence that deserves direct examination before this investigation closes tonight, and it concerns the strategic decision that investigators made by allowing this information to become public through Fox News Digital's reporting. Law enforcement in a federal investigation of this magnitude controls information carefully. Every public disclosure is a calculated decision. The fact that the Google Trends data became public, that Fox News Digital was able to identify, reconstruct, and publish it, is not an investigative accident. It is a deliberate choice about what information is advantageous to have circulating publicly at this stage of the investigation. Investigators could have obtained the Google warrant, identified the IP address, traced the subscriber, and built the case entirely through sealed confidential process. They chose not to keep this signal private. Why? 3 reasons, each serving specific investigative purposes. First, public disclosure generates tips. Someone who knows a person matching this behavioral pattern, who noticed unusual computer activity, who heard strange questions about the Guthrie family, who observed an obsessive interest in Savannah Guthrie's salary or financial situation, may not have connected the dots before seeing this information publicly. The specific combination of behaviors, presented publicly with enough detail to trigger recognition, prompts exactly those calls to the tip line. A name provided through a community tip, cross-referenced against the IP address data obtained through the Google warrant, creates corroboration from 2 independent sources simultaneously. Second, public disclosure creates psychological pressure on the suspect. The person who made these searches believed their digital reconnaissance was private and untraceable. They took extensive precautions at the physical crime scene, masked, gloved, hooded, equipped, and trusted that the preparation phase was invisible. Discovering that their 8 months of digital planning is now documented publicly on national news creates the kind of acute stress that Jim Clemente described. Stress that leads to behavioral changes that people around the suspect can observe and report. A suspect under that kind of pressure may attempt to delete search history from their devices, but computer forensics can recover deleted files from storage media even after deletion. Evidence of deletion, the act of attempting to destroy the record, becomes additional evidence of consciousness of guilt. Why delete searches from a device unless you know those searches are incriminating? Third, public disclosure creates competitive pressure among anyone else who may have knowledge of the planning or execution. If multiple people had any awareness of what was being planned in the months before February 1st, 2026, whether as collaborators, as witnesses, or simply as people who noticed something and said nothing, seeing the investigation advance this specifically and this publicly changes the risk calculation. The family reward of $1 million anonymous sits on the table. The first person to provide useful information that leads to identification claims that reward and, potentially, more favorable treatment from prosecutors. The competitive dynamic that creates among people with relevant knowledge tends to produce cooperation. All three of those strategic purposes are served by the public disclosure of the Google Trends data. The investigation is not stalled. It is using every available tool, both confidential and public, to drive toward the name that the IP address records already contain. Nancy Guthrie has been missing since February 1st, 2026. No arrest has been made. No suspect has been publicly named. The investigation is ongoing. But the digital trail exists. It is permanent. It leads somewhere. And somewhere in the investigative record, a warrant is either already served or is being prepared that will tell investigators whose device made these searches, whose fingers typed that address into Google on June 21st, 2025, and who came back to type it again 3 weeks before Nancy Guthrie disappeared. That person is known somewhere. Someone shares a home with them, or an office, or a neighborhood. Someone noticed something last year. Someone is sitting on a memory right now that looks different in light of everything that has been documented publicly about this case. The tip line is 1-800-CALL-FBI. Tips can be submitted at tips.fbi.gov. The Pima County Sheriff's Department tip line is 520-351-4900. $1 million from the Guthrie family, anonymous, for information leading to Nancy's recovery. $100,000 from the FBI. Your name does not have to be attached to anything. The information is what matters. Nancy Guthrie deserves to come home.